Angie, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm not fat, I'm just under tall. I'm from Blythe. Surely you all know what Blythe is. It's over at the end of the world, just before it falls into Arizona. And the reason I'm in Blythe is because some of us will go to any lengths to be married. And yeah, you have to be careful what you pray for because you got to be specific. I mean, if God's going to send you a Prince Charming, be sure and tell him you don't want him in Blythe. I was not specific enough. But he is the only toad I ever kissed that turned into a prince. Usually I kiss a prince and they turn into toads. And so that's what I'm doing in Blythe. I'm really from Orange County, California, and I was born and raised there. And the family that I was born into wasn't impressed with me then, and they aren't impressed with me now. They're not too happy about what you've done with me. The only thing is that you've made me a sober big mouth instead of a drunken big mouth. My mother still doesn't think I'm an alcoholic. If I ever go visit her and she has people visiting her, she'll pull me aside because she doesn't want me to embarrass her. And she'll say, now don't you be telling anything about you being an alcoholic. You're not an alcoholic. You were always that way. And if I tell her anything about some of the things, not nearly anything what I'm going to tell you about me, her eyes will get real big and she'll say, well, if you're an alcoholic, you don't get it from my side of the family. I was born and raised in Orange County into this family that I had an older sister that was perfect. You know the type I'm talking about. They always told her what to do, and she always did it, and she always did it right, and she screwed it up for me because I never knew how to be good. Somehow or another, I never remembered to be good until after I was bad, and then it was too late because they were always whipping on me. I don't know why they're whipping on me. I just know it's because I don't know how to be good. I'm a battered child, and I don't know I'm a battered child. If I'd have known that, I'd have held it against them guys and thrown it in their face. I just knew that I always got whipped because I didn't know how to be good. When they brought me home for the hospital, they still didn't have a name for me, and the reason for that is because my daddy wanted to name me after his girlfriend, and my mother's narrow-minded. My mother has the little purple lips, not blue lips because she's a Mexican. She's got the little purple lips, And they were divorced when I was 7, and she'd say to me, you're just like your father, and she'd get them little lips. And I knew what her opinion was of him. She didn't like him too well. So she'd send me to the nuns so they could teach me to be a lady. And what the nuns thought was a lady wasn't appealing to me then, and it isn't appealing to me now. Not only did I not know how to be good, but as soon as they said, thou shalt not, I may not have thought of doing it before, but as soon as they said, thou shalt not, I had an overwhelming desire to do it. It would get in my head, and I couldn't let it go until I did it. And then I could kind of relax, and so somebody dared me, and I raised the nun's skirts. See what you wear under all them clothes. I'm so glad they don't wear all them clothes anymore, because I guess they got tired of kids like me going behind them and raising their skirts up. And so they 86 me from catechism. And when I got home, I got the whipping of my life because, I was an embarrassment to my mother. And but the next day when I got to school, all the kids thought I was terrific. Boy, everybody pointed me out and laughing and giggling and carrying on. And it seems to me that I was born with an emptiness in my soul, a yearning, a longing, a hunger to be loved, to be wanted, to be accepted. Most of my life, before I came to you and for a long time afterwards, the emotion that I remember the most is the hugging myself and wailing, not crying, just wailing with this terrible loneliness inside of me. And you see, that's why I had that hunger, and I didn't know what it was. I just know that I felt always unwanted, unnecessary, and not belonging anywhere. I believe that I always had the pilot lit. All I ever needed was the fuel because I needed to belong. I needed to know a place where I was, and I never had any. You see, I didn't know what was wrong with me that didn't seem to be wrong with other people. So when I got all that attention, it filled up some of them empty places. I worshiped my mother. I wanted her love and approval so desperately. I was so hungry for love. I'd have given my heart to anybody that would have taken it because I needed so much, and I didn't know what it was. And when I also used to do a little side things like stealing. It always was a good idea. I liked things that belonged to other people, and it was exciting to break into their houses and take their search through their doors. I just thought it was fun. And when I got into a lot of trouble, I ran off someplace. So I ran off to be with my daddy because I knew it was going to be better over there. I got into so much trouble over here. And hope springs eternal, that it's going to be better over there. So I ran off to my daddy, and he was over in the San Fernando Valley where he'd taken up light housekeeping with a lady with 8 kids. And all he wants is one more, right? And here comes trouble, this needy kid. And he used to take people up north to pick grapes and prunes in the San Joaquin Valley. And we were fruit pickers. And I believe that God made 2 kinds of Mexicans. That's fruit pickers and non-fruit pickers. And I'm not a fruit picker. They tried to make a fruit picker out of me, and it didn't take. But last winter, we have some pecan trees along I was out there picking pecan trees all December. I mean, all day long, me and my dog out there. I think it's in the genes because I really enjoyed myself, probably because nobody's making me do it. And anyway, it was while we were up there in the wine country that we stayed beyond the season with the Gallo brothers, and they gave my dad a case of sherry wine. And somebody must have said, "Thou shalt not." Because I remember I had a big water glass of their wine, and when it went down good. I mean, I loved it. Every bit of me loved it. It's just too bad something that good has to be wasted on social drinkers that don't appreciate it. I appreciated it. I loved it. I love that feeling, that warm, I love thrills and excitement, and it did it for me. And anything gonna make me feel that good, I want more. Because I got a button that says more, and the one that says enough was left out. Because then it's the next day. Somehow it got to be the next day before I ever even started to have fun. And when I come to, my hair stuck to my face where I threw up all over myself. And my clothes are torn where I got in a fight with somebody, and I don't know what happened. And I spent a lifetime looking at people's faces, looking in their eyes, trying to figure out what I had done, terrified to know and terrified not to know. I had a sense of shame and being dirty that went all the way through me. I don't know what to do with those feelings. I just cover them up and act like a clown, or with violence, because that's the only way I handle anything that used to be that embarrassing to me. And that's the way it always was. The first drink I took was my first drunk, and blackout and puking, because that's the kind of a drunk that I am from the beginning. I don't know anything about social drinking. I just know that I drank every time I had a chance, and I got drunk every time I drank, and I embarrassed myself every time I drank. I came to my mother shortly after because I didn't like picking fruit, and she told me I couldn't come home. I was just a child. I was 13 years old. But you see, I've seen 13-year-old little girls today, and I was never that young. I always felt old and unnecessary. So I'm the type that starts running the streets very young, living here and there and everywhere. I don't live under bridges, but I live with friends of my mother and friends and people that would take me in for a little while, and people would always take me in for a little while because they felt sorry for me. And I seemed to have an appealing personality when they first met me. It was after they got to know me, after they got to see how I was when I was drinking, when I would become vicious, or when I would not come home for days at a time, that people got tired of me. This is the time in my generation where us Mexicans used to join the gangs and beat each other up and call it fun. And I loved that. And we also used to have them parties for the whole weekend. I used to love them parties. You'd get drunk and sober several times all weekend. I always got drunk faster than anybody else, so they used to say, you know, why don't you just take some buttermilk or olive oil so that you don't get so drunk so fast? And all it did was ruin my clothes and I threw up because I wasn't very popular with the girls, but I was always popular with the boys. The girls were always trying to tell me what I did the next day, so I used to beat them up, and then they didn't tell me. I'm still a child. I don't know how to work, so I take up burglary. I wasn't a bad person. It just seemed to be a good idea at the time. I didn't know when the state of California discovered me, they didn't understand that my case was different. And he sent me out to do a little bit of time for the state of California. 9 months, because I'm just 17, almost 18, and 9 months isn't very long, but I don't know how to be good there either. So I do 13 months, and Jesus, I got scared. I thought I'd be the only gray-haired little old lady coming out of that reformatory. When they let me out, I took my first inventory. I don't have a job, I don't have money, I don't have any home. I don't have an education, and I don't really have much going for me. So it's the first time that I remember starting to think. Because I've always one that wants to live in the answer and not in the problem. So I thought I better go out and find me a husband. Because God knows I need somebody to take care of me. And I went out looking for a husband in places that husbands are not to be looked for. Unfortunately for both of us, I found one. You know, there seems to be a certain type of man that always caught my attention. You know, they wear them little T-shirts with them big muscles and tattoos and the greasy hair. They look at me with them shiny eyes and say, what's happening, baby? God, that is so I used to think that shiny look in their eyes was charisma. Today I know it to be psychosis. But they're so challenging, you know? I really like them dull people. I wanted somebody challenging and exciting like I was. And so this guy was a mainline heroin user, and you just don't live happily ever after with one of those. But I thought he would change for me, and I tried very hard to make him change. And we had honeymoon and battle in our home. Very similar to the cat that jumped on the skunk. He didn't get all he wanted, just all he could stand. You know? I didn't mean to get a little tacky here. I'm not use any four-letter words if I can help it. But sometimes I get impressed with my own self and get carried away. And my number one language, which is profanity, comes out. So you've given me a little bit of class, so I'll try to adhere to it. Anyway, this guy and I, 3 months later, I was pregnant and we were married, and he decides that he starts hearing them stories about me and them bars and them parties and stuff. He doesn't want people talking that way about his wife. So he decides I'm going to stay home and he's going to keep on partying. Well, that doesn't appeal to me too well, and but he doesn't want me to drink except when I'm with him, but he introduces me to little white pills with crosses on them. I don't know what they are, but I sure knew what they did to me. I had one eyeball over there and one over there, and I'd make baby clothes all night long. See the inside of my mouth, scratch, chew gum, smoke cigarettes, drink coffee, and to hear that mariachi music and clean your house with a toothbrush all at the same time. And you know, I've seen those bumper stickers where I've driven down the street that says, I found it. Man, I found it. There isn't any feeling in the world like being pulled in all directions at once. I mean, why? Because once I started taking uppers, I started taking downers, and I started using whatever alcohol that happened to be working at the time, you see, because once I needed to have something that would push away them blackouts, because it was what I did when I was in blackouts or what I thought I did that I felt so humiliating. So it was how they say in chapter 3, ad infinitum. This was one of the ad infinitums that I used to control my alcoholism. And for 12 solid years, I was not to know what it was to have a sober day. And one day at a time, I went into literal hell. And that's not what I wanted from life. All I ever wanted was somebody to love me, for me to have a home and a family to belong to me. You see, that's all, not much. A little house in some corner of some barrio with a tortilla smells and enchiladas and the little slippers at 5 o'clock, kind of a Mexican Ozzie and Harriet type of a... Well, it was not to be, obviously. By the time I had my baby, I realized this man didn't want to be married, and I figured out he didn't want to be married to me. So when they placed that baby in my arms, I felt like finally, somebody belongs to me. Somebody belongs to me. And I knew that baby belonged to me. And I loved my baby. I held her in my arms, and I would look at her by the hour. And I promised her I would never beat her, abandon her, discard her as I had been. And I have meant it with every fiber of my being. If I could have been good, if I could have been different for anybody, it would have been my baby, because I loved her so much. But I'm an alcoholic, and I'm a woman alcoholic. And when I drink, I have absolutely no choices and no rights. When I drink, I do what's in front of me to do. I don't know why I do those things. I just do them. I think that there's something terribly wrong with me. Way down inside of me, there was always the spark that never quite died of the woman that I am today. But I thought that there was a monster that lived within me. I didn't know that I had something called alcoholism. You see, those things were an answer to me for what I was. That's what I thought. And I took that baby and her sister to places that children should not be taken, because I'm an alcoholic. And I just throw me away a little bit at a time. I don't know, I didn't know anything about self-esteem or self-love at the time. All I knew that I had to hide from you, from them, that what I was, whatever it was that I was, I didn't know what it was. I just knew that it was ugly and unlovable, and I was so hungry to be loved. I left Daddy after the second daughter was born because he was not changing it. I was 21, almost 22, and I felt old. You know, I'm almost 54 years old today, and I feel younger inside. It was said last night. I feel younger inside today than I ever did back then. I used to look in the mirror and see nothing but age pulling me down. And I thought, I better go out, find me somebody else before I get so old. Nobody's going to want me. Besides, my mother told me that I was going to be like a rabbit and have a baby every year. Jesus, I never remember my mother saying anything kind. I know she must have said something kind to me, but I never heard anything. It was always the rejection that I heard. It was always the fact that I was not enough. You see, that's what I heard and hugged to my heart forever from anybody, but especially from my poor mother that did the best she could with what she had to work with. And so I left that man and I went out looking for another husband. And I didn't find another husband, but I fell in love. And you know, when I fall in love all over my body. Every inch of me falls in love forever. I can't remember the names of some of the men I've fallen in love with. I told you hope springs eternal. And guy I fell in love with was called CB, and that was his nickname. It stood for Crazy Bastard. And I mean, he was exciting. He really was exciting. We were quite a pair. Unfortunately, we had earlier dates many times, and then we were each other's lower companions. And these are my bar drinking years. This is the years when I was an unprotected bar drinking female. I know the feeling of degradation and self-loathing that a woman alcoholic goes through when she's a bar drinker, and I was a bar drinker very, very young. This was 5 years of unprotected bar drinking. I drank in the Mexican bars, and you know this weekend has been significant for me because I have always been afraid of being talked to in the ways that I was in the bars, and I have been talked to many times by the men in my race with Snickers, and so I have avoided them. And I was asked to speak at a Spanish-speaking conference in a couple of weeks, and I don't want to go because every time I go I have bad experiences because I had the rejection to me. And I called my sponsor, and I told her all these things of why I didn't want to go. And she said, well, maybe there's some woman out there that you need to be honest about in the podium and say it, and maybe there's some woman out there that needs to hear that. And I said, well, let me explain it another way. And she says, you want to clarify the issue, huh? And I said, yes. And then it wasn't very long after that I got a letter from Mike that says, I'm salute the bilingual meeting last night. I mean, you can't avoid a God shot like that. It was I called my sponsor, and she gave me a horse laugh. And but I was good because I was able to see a lot last night when I was able to share. Because you see, I know what it is to be talked to in ways I don't want to be talked to, and touched in places I don't want to be touched, and have to put a clown, I don't care, and I died inside. After 5 years of this terrible self-loathing that goes with that type of drinking, my husband was in the penitentiary, and he wrote me letters and says, babes, this time it's going to be different. And I'm clutching at straws again. So we decided we were really going to try. I know I was going to really try. I even married him in the Catholic Church, and that's going to any length for a Mexican and Catholic, especially since he was a Methodist. I mean, this is how bad it was. I was going to make this work with this guy no matter what. So we moved about 30 miles from Mama. I guess I was afraid to move too far because maybe I'd come back and they wouldn't recognize me. But I moved over to Mira Loma, and the best thing about Mira Loma that I can say is in the middle of 4 wineries. Other than that, I mean, if you think Blythe is a pit, Mira Loma is the armpit of California. And but we bought a little acre of land with the chickens and the turkeys, and planted a garden and bought some horses, and we were going to be farmers, as Delphine and I, and joined the PTA. And that first Christmas, I was a librarian, and this Delphine gangster was Santa Claus. If them folks had only known on whose lap their little darlings were sitting on. I mean, he had tracks every vein that was exposed in his body, but they didn't know, and I wasn't going to tell them, because after a while, that life gets boring, and it loses what it's supposed to be. And my husband makes a pass at my neighbor, and I go beat up the neighbor, and I find out that you're not supposed to beat up neighbors when you're respectable. And he starts making the run to his connection in Orange County, and I start making the run to those wineries. I'm a firm believer you can place me in the best of circumstances, and sooner or later I have to create whatever is inside of me. Because it's inside of me I can't live, and you see, I don't know that. Something happened to my drinking at that time, and it changed, where before I had been a party girl and a bar drinker and loved the boys, booze and the cha-cha-cha. Now I became a bedroom drinker, where I didn't want to be around with people, where people would come over and I would be violent with them, and I would be abusive of them, and I pushed away everybody near and dear to me. This is the time when I know what the words agony, despair, and utter loneliness, and horrible being alone, where you can't live and you can't die and you can't drink and you can't be sober. And I don't know that everything, all the magic went out of the bottle. All the happiness, all the joy, and all the hope. It promised me so much and delivered nothing. And I kept going back to it over and over and over again. And all I remember at that time is either being drunk, being in agony, or being passed out and coming to in my own field. And I just died inside, and I just planned to die. Living had never been anything that I ever wanted to do. I just knew it was never, 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 never going to be any better. So I saved my sleeping pills and waited until this man was home one day, and I told him I was going to kill myself. And he said, all right, and went back to watching television. We had a slight communication problem. So I went and took a bath, cleaned my house somewhat, just in case I died, they would know. Not that anybody cared, but I didn't want him to know. And so I went to bed to die, and it was not for attention. It was not for anything else, except I was just tired, just so utterly bone-weary tired. And all I did was sleep for 2 days and 2 nights. And when I came to, I was enraged. I was in a rage to be alive. You see, I couldn't live and I couldn't die. Couldn't even kill myself, and I couldn't drink and I couldn't be sober. And there was nothing but madness inside of me. And when I look upon that day, it has got to be the loneliest day of my life. When I realized this man had been in bed with me both nights while I was in that coma. And never once did he consider taking me to a doctor or to a hospital. So unwanted and so unnecessary was the feeling, the desperateness that we go through. And it was not the last drink that I had. But you see, that was a turning point. When I was able to look upon that day with some semblance of objectivity, I realized that my higher power has always had his hand upon my life, even on that day. Because you see, that very day there was a knock on the doors, a lady from the PTA. If there's somebody I didn't want to see, it's a lady from the PTA, because she was one of them. And in a moment of weakness, I let her in and I tell her my tale of woe. I tell her I've been trying to kill myself because of this SOB. How he done me wrong, how he promised all this stuff and he didn't fulfill it. And she stayed with me and she heard me out and she cleaned me up. And she talked to me and she asked me someplace along the way if I ever heard of Al-Anon. I'd never heard of Al-Anon. But I got the idea that if I went there, he would straighten up. So she cleaned me up and took me to Al-Anon. And somehow I didn't fit in Al-Anon. I felt a little bit like a whorewood in a nunnery. I didn't fit in with them square butts, none at all. But you know, they hugged me. They hugged me, them ladies. And I smile. And it's in defense of Al-Anon that I'd like to tell you that lady only had about 3 months there. At the time, she just didn't know what to do with me. She just knew I was suffering, and she had found answers with you, and she wanted it for me. Now, every so often she comes, cleans me up, and takes me. I don't hear anything. You know, I'm not there. My body may be there, but my brain's gone. These are fuzzy times in my life. And one day I heard the word release, and I went home and told him in detail how I was going to release him. And so he used to sleep with his clothes on and a knife under the pillow, and I'd put my big black coat on and sit in the corner and watch him. As he'd be dozing off, I'd go take a little peek at him. He'd go, "Oh, God!" I loved that. He thought he was such a bad Pachuco type, you know. Then young time, he was scared of me. And he would say unkind things to me. He'd say, "Baby, I may have a monkey on my back, but you got an orangutan." And I thought, how dare he? He was so bad, he made me look good. And one day I came home and he was gone. He took everything with him. He wasn't planning on coming back, and he always went and came back. If you know how they do. And that's the way it had to be, because that life was unbearable. It was familiar. And fear has been the great compromiser of my life. And I'd have stayed there forever till I'd have killed him or forced him to kill me. Because you see, sometimes the madness would be so great and there was no poison inside of me to alleviate it. And somehow the only release that I got is for those terrible, horrible battles that we had where I would come out looking not even like a human being from the batterings that I had. And it wasn't because he was a bad man. I looking back upon that today, he was a sick man, and I was a sick woman, you see. But he used to always say, "If you don't shut up, I'm going to hit you." And, you know, it was like, "What? Thou shalt not." And so I tell him, "Well, hit me with a red," and tell him everything about his mother and his grandmother and various and sundry other relatives, and I lost every battle. I just never knew when to shut up. Sooner or later, all my husbands have said that I'm a great gal if I only didn't talk. You see, even my present Prince Charming has told me that a couple of times. But he's sober, he can't whack on me. Besides, I'm sober now, and nobody's whacking on me anymore. I don't need any help. If sometimes I can whack on myself, I don't need any help from anybody else. I can be my own worst enemy or my own best friend. And today, because of you, I choose to be my best friend. But it wasn't my time yet. What happened is that Al-Anon lady took me to my first AA meeting, and I'm thinking the Al-Anons had found me out. And they don't know what to do with me, so they're kicking me into Alcoholics Anonymous. And I kind of thought they didn't like alcoholics too well. I don't know where I got that idea, because, but I just got that idea somewhere along the. I couldn't even look them in the eye, and I was embarrassed that they didn't want me there. So she took me to this AA meeting, little old rinky-dink clubhouse in Pomona, in August of 1964. And I walked into that room and sat in the back and listened to the sounds of Alcoholics Anonymous. I listened to that belly laughter, that smile that reaches the soul, that shine in the eyes, and that happy talk. Those are the sounds of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I fell in love with what was happening between you, because I had never had it, never experienced what you had with you. And I just sat back there. And I let it wash over my soul, and I hungered for it. I wanted it. I often wondered what it is and where does it come from. And it came to me one day, and I consider it a spiritual experience when I realized that these are just empty rooms. That which happens in here, we bring it with us, every one of us, and it intermingles and becomes a group conscience, the higher power. You call it whatever you want, but you know, you and I know there is a dynamic something that happens when you and I come together. And if you knew like I was, you don't have it. There was a deadness inside of me. Way down inside of me was a little spark that never quite died. And I wanted what you had. I just thought it's too bad I'm not an alcoholic. If there's another name for the disease that you and I have, it's called I ain't got it. I knew I was weird. And I knew I was different, and I knew I was 3 steps ahead of the men with the butterfly nets. Hadn't been discovered yet. But I didn't think I had what you people had. And so we programmed out. The only thing I understand. You see, newcomer, if you be hungry like me. I just sat back there and let it wash over my soul. But I looked around at all them sober, single, good-looking young guys, and I said, man, I'm going to get me one of those. And I did. It was the sickest one there. I got radar. But it takes what it takes, and it doesn't matter how. My higher power knew the only thing that would catch my attention. And for 10 months, because I was so foggy, and for 10 months I came around you as a visitor, because I'm a reject from Al-Anon, right? I'm not an Al-Anon, and I'm not an alcoholic, but I'd never fit in anywhere anyway. And in Pomona in those days, I'd go around the room, and when he came to me, I'd say, I'm Angie, and I'm a visitor. And I put my smile on, because someplace I'd heard that I had a pretty smile, so I make sure I give you my smile that way I got the heat off. And so nobody ever said you don't belong here. Somehow you understood I've been kicked in the teeth by life and rejected by everybody I'd come in contact with, and I couldn't have stood any more rejection, especially from you. And you put your arm around me and you said, keep coming back. The most significant words that you and I share with one another is keep coming back. Do you know what that feels like when you're used to people saying, keep on going, weirdo? Huh? What a disappointment it was to me when I found out you were telling that to everybody. I thought it was just me. I feel a little uncomfortable around you after a while. Well, I might be a little alcoholic. I used to be an alcoholic when I was a kid before I started taking Benzedrine. But now that wasn't my problem after all. I might be something like potential, but I wasn't as bad as some of them guys, you know. So I quit drinking and doubled up in the Milltowns and got weirder, and then this guy wants to get rid of me because I get weird. I mean, I want to kill when I get weird. And when they don't do it my way, I kill. And I'm not easy to get rid of, so because I didn't have a backup. Everybody's got to have a backup. So I moved to Pomona to be closer to the action. And I walked into a room one day, and there's some cute little boy talking, and he had big blue eyes and blonde hair, and I have an affinity for blue eyes and blonde hair. And he's saying he doesn't have a girlfriend, he doesn't have a surfboard, and he doesn't have a car. And he just got out of a boys' reformatory. And I think to myself, come here, little boy, I'll take care of you. And I did. And he don't know what hit him. Oh, man, he don't know what hit him. And I educated him on sick buds. He was 21 and I was 32 going on 92. And he'd been locked up for 4 years. And he was a sweet little boy. And after that relationship was over, he decided to become a minister. And I'd like to think that somehow in my small way, I'll push him over to God. He was the first man that had ever been kind to me. He was the first man that had ever been gentle with me. And everywhere that he went, he wanted to take me with him. And he seemed so proud to be seen with me. Me that had always been abused and misused by every man that I'd ever fallen in love with. And I'd have stayed there forever if I could have, you see. But I do believe that you and I come together, not by accident, but by divine appointment. By divine appointment. I am grateful today to look back and see God's hand in my life. They sent a gentle young man to treat me gentle and teach me about the gentlemen in Alcoholics Anonymous. He was the one that walked them streets with me when the madness would be so bad inside that I couldn't stand it. Because you see, I had heard when I come to you about you keep coming back and you live happily ever after and sobriety is wonderful. And it wasn't that way with me because my case is different. I walked them streets without any skin on. You see, I never heard anything about withdrawal. I took so much different poison inside of me. It's a wonder that I didn't die. I didn't know anything about convulsions, and I didn't know anything about withdrawals. I just knew that I had to walk and walk and walk. And I had 2 little girls to support, and I had to work, and I couldn't concentrate on what was in front of me, and they were going to fire me. And I started to cry, and I told the man that I was getting sober, and he had been exposed to Alcoholics Anonymous through a friend, and so he looked over me, you see. And he seeming to look over me, but my higher power, I know, was behind it all. After that, I believe that we come together by an divine appointment. But when that appointment has been met and you go on your way, you take a little bit of me with you, and you leave a little bit of you behind, because our lives have touched. But every relationship has its beginning and its parting. That's not to say that I like partings today, but the only relationship that keeps on growing is a relationship that I hold with my higher power today, but I didn't know it then. You see, I turned my will and my life over to the care of this man because he loved me, and he told me so, and I believed him. But I always held on with a death grip. Bill Wilson said in his writings that the good is the enemy of the best, and I understand that. I was always willing to sell myself away for the little corner of good and not wait for anything else, because I didn't know there was anything better coming along. And I knew that if I wanted something, I better go after it and clutch it. I didn't know that that's how you strangle, you see. I didn't know that. I just survived as a wild animal survives what's in front of me. But you told me keep coming back, and I fell in love with you. But I turned my will and my life over to the care of a man, and I didn't know the difference. And after he got drunk, so did I. And it was not my worst drunk, but it was my most hopeless one. Because I knew I had tried Alcoholics Anonymous, and I knew it worked. It worked for you. But my case was different. And again, I tried to kill myself. And my little girls put their arms around my knees and said, Mommy, Mommy, please don't kill yourself. How could they stand to have me, this ugly, horrible monster, as a mother? And how could they love me? But I couldn't kill myself for them. And that very day, one of you named Carson called me and told me, let's go to a meeting. And I said, I can't go. I've been drinking and I've been eating pills. And he said, come on anyway. And it was on a rainy Wednesday night when I came back to you. The miracle for me is not that I've come to Alcoholics Anonymous, because hundreds and hundreds of people come and don't stay. But you see, the miracle for me is that I'm still here. And that last December, the 22nd, I celebrated my 21st birthday. That is the miracle for me, you see. I am one of the desperate. I am one of the desperate ones, and I believe that for me I had to be beaten down into desperateness over and over and over again in order to appreciate what I have found with you. And the victory is not mine. How could it be? I belong to a little bit of you have been inside of me, and I belong to you because I am today what you have made of me, and it has been wonderful. I am composed of a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I came back thinking I was too damaged for you, and it couldn't be for me. In Southern California, they read a portion of chapter 5 in all the meetings, and when they would read, rarely have we seen a person fail, I think, I know they're talking about me, because a little further on down it says, they are not at fault, they seem to have been born that way. I said, man, I'm screwed, I knew I was born that way. My mother will tell you I was born that way. But a little further on down, I think Bill was so wise to write. And then there are those that have grave emotional and mental disorders. I am so grateful they have that in there, because that's the catch-all for those of us that think our case is different. You see, but a little further on down it says, many of them do recovery. They have the capacity to be honest. And I'm not presumptuous to tell you that I have the capacity to be honest, because I really don't know the difference between right and wrong. You may not believe that unless you're one of my type. And that's because if I want something bad enough, I can go home and meditate and pray and meditate and pray, and sooner or later God and I will decide His will for me. And once I show me that, He ain't nothing to lay it on you, and you can't talk me out of it. How do you know? Thank God for people called sponsors. I have a lady that when I grow up, I want to be like my sponsor. And she's rotten. I mean, she doesn't treat me very kind sometimes. I'll call her, sometimes, and I said, Mary, but you don't understand, Mary. And she says, she just gets tired of it, and she says, Angie, you don't have to sit in your own shit just because it's warm. Or else I'll call her, with a gloom, and I'll say, but Mary, you don't understand, he's doing this, or she's doing that, or they're doing that. And she said, well, who's not doing it your way? And it's one of those restless days when you know, and you're picky about little things. And I call her up, and she says, well, it's one of those what's wrong, nothing's wrong, that's what's wrong days. and you get lonesome for the agony. That's the way she treats me, you see. But she wasn't my sponsor in the beginning. I didn't even know she existed. If I had, I would have run the other way. I didn't have a sponsor for 2 years because I didn't like them women anymore when I was sober than I did when I was drinking. The older ones that had a lot of time, they look at you. I don't want them looking at me, but they look at you. I don't want them to know what I don't want them to know. I don't know what they're looking at, but I don't want them to know. And today I know they know. And the reason they're there, they know, is because they've been there. And the younger ones, well, I got this cute young thing here. Yeah, I checked some young chick out, and I said, let's go this way, honey. And today he's a barber because I didn't let him go to college. I mean, he was easy for me to manipulate because he cared for me, you see, and he believed what I said because I could be very convincing. In the beginning, they all know more than me. After a while, I know more than some of them. And then the day came when I hated a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. There is no hate more exquisite than hating a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. When you go to a meeting every night, I mean, I'm a newcomer. They tell me I'm supposed to go to a meeting every night. I just thought it was dedication. Today I know that the alternative was to be home with me. So for 2 years I went to a meeting every night, and so did he. He'd been sober 12 and a half years and didn't know nothing. I'm a newcomer. I'm supposed to go every night. What's he doing going for 12 and a half years? Besides, who wants to be sober 12 and a half years? And I would walk in a room and I wouldn't be happy till I saw him. I'd look around and God, this sure knows what I did. I hated the way he walked, the way he talked, the way he sat, the way he smoked, the way he laughed and breathed, and I'd sit
and continue to play. This is the end of side one. Please turn. Side two will continue in just a moment. Please continue to play.
Watch him. God, I don't know what to do with all this rage, and then you ruin it by saying, resentments are the number one offender for the alcoholic. They're fatal. God used to catch my attention because I may not have wanted what you had, what he had. I sure didn't want what I had. So I kept trying to do what you guys told me to do. And I don't have a sponsor. I don't like them women any more sober than I did when I was drinking. And one of them had volunteered to be my sponsor. And she says you have to give up that young man, or if you stay sober one day he will give you up, because there's such a big difference in your age. And I had never lived without a man. I'm not talking about sex. I'm talking about somebody to hold me close and make that lonely, horrible something go away, at least for a little while. You see, when I was with you, I felt good, and I laughed. But, after an hour and a half, I would leave, and that madness would come back, and that loneliness would come back. But he was so kind to me, and when he was with me, I didn't have that loneliness inside. And she said, you have to stay home and learn to be a mother with those two girls. And I didn't know how to be a mother any more sober than I did when I was drinking. There was still a lot of tension. They were still terrified of me. They were still remembering the batterings, and I was still slapping them around. I could not predict how I was going to feel in half an hour. I may be feeling wonderful right now, and then a thought would strike me of terror, and then I would go berserk. I would always go berserk. I had trouble for 5 years into my sobriety with depressions and violence, and I don't know that all the poison I had inside of me, it's a wonder that I had any kind of level in my emotional life. So I thought about what this lady told me, and it was really hard, so I did the most rational thing for me is I gave up the sponsor. So I knew how to live without her. She made me feel guilty. So when I had all these feelings about this man, I didn't go to the women because the men are much kinder than the women. And, you go over there and you're cute and you're 32 and you got a smile on your face and you say, how do you get over resentments? And they'd look at me, and they'd touch it. And they'd say, turn it over, easy does it. These two shall pass one day at a time. Go home, read the book, keep coming back, and don't drink. And I went home and did all this stuff because I wanted to do what worked for you, too, just in case it worked for me. And I'd come back the next night and tried it on this guy. And I would walk in and I'd look around there, he was, it didn't work. So I'd go to somebody else, and again they'd say, turn it over as he does it, this too shall pass one day at a time, go home, read the book, keep coming back, and don't drink. After a while, I got the message. You don't know the answer either. I just keep doing it because I don't know what else to do. And one day, the secret of Alcoholics Anonymous overtook me. I was sober about 9 months. And I went into a room, and this man was talking, and he was crying when he talked. And I thought, how embarrassing. A man crying. Jesus, there's nothing worse than a sissy man. Men are supposed to be tough and never scared and courageous, and John Wayne and Iwo Jima and Pancho Villa and Emiliano Zapata and all them kind of jazz. What's he crying about? Jesus, how embarrassing. After the meeting, everybody went and put their arms around him, and I didn't want you to know I didn't like that was the one. So I went, and I also put my arms around him, and he put his head upon my shoulder and sobbed. And all that anger, all that resentment melted as if it had never been, as if it had never been. And I learned the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous. I learned about caring for you and staying here and keeping on, doing all these things that appear dumb, that appear, how could they possibly work? It's the only thing I ever known that I've ever tried and don't see the results until after I've done them. And yes, as Mona said, the program are the steps, because I did those steps. I didn't think they were to the best of my ability, but they were the best of my ability. The important thing that I was willing to do them. Regardless of everything that I did wrong, I fell in love with who I was when I was with you. And I wanted what you had. You see, that's it right there. One drunk talking to another. One drunk caring for another. I married that young man with a fear that one day he'd leave. I looked at those girls and I knew I had ruined them forever, and I used to say, God, spare my babies. And he didn't spare my babies. My daughters went the same route I had been, and I would pray, oh, God, please take care of my babies. And he didn't. And the day came when I came home one day, and they were so loaded, I hit them, and one of them ran off to Ohio. I didn't even know any Mexicans in Ohio. I hated my mother. I only went 30 miles, and here she was in Ohio. And the other one, the one I had held in my arms so many years ago, went to live in a commune, and she came home one day with a burn the size of a silver dollar on her chest where people had been putting cigarettes out on, and I died inside. I went into a depression, and again I contemplated an attempt at suicide. The young man went and took me to the psycho ward, went home, packed his clothes, and left me, and I felt devastated. You had lied to me. You had lied to me. You said that I would change, that things would be better, and it hadn't. I was really just a failure. I had always been. And the reason that I stand before you today, I didn't want to drink. I was beyond that. I just wanted out. I just wanted to die. And the reason that I stand before you is because my higher power has touched my life. He had his hand upon my life, and he sent you back to me. And it is from the women that came around me. I felt so devastated that I had no more walls. You see, I always had felt that you were the toast burners, and I was the only dog among you. You see, I thought that my case was different here too. There isn't anything like devastating pain for me to make all them walls come down. And I was finally able to share the secrets of my heart with you, and you shared the secrets of your heart with me. And I realized I was not so different. You may have done the things that you did in your kitchen and in your bedroom, and might have done the things that I did in the bars and in my bedroom. But inside you felt the same way about you that I felt the way about me. And so it is from the women that I've learned to be a woman. In Alcoholics Anonymous, we become each other's mamas. And I have been mothered in Alcoholics Anonymous. You held me close and you cried with me and you stayed with me and you brought me into your home and you listened to me. And when I whine good. I mean, I can really whine because it hurts so bad and I'm not silent in my pain. And so from the women, I learned to be a woman. And it is from the men in Alcoholics Anonymous that have treated me like a lady that I've learned to be a lady. One of you named Dave, I went to you and I said, Dave, what's wrong with me that I cannot seem to form a one-to-one relationship, not even with a beautiful man like him? And he held me close and said, you know, Angie, you are a beautiful, warm, loving lady, and one day you will know the reason. I had heard words like that before, but I had never knew that it was. I thought that the reason was because they didn't know who I was. And I believed him. I went home and got on my knees and I said, thank you, God, for showing me the reason. Bring him back. And he didn't come back. And I said, screw him, I'll let him do what they damn please. I'm tired. I'm tired of trying to be a mother and I'm trying to be your wife. And I don't know about your higher power, but mine has a weird sense of humor. When I want something so bad, oh God, 10 Hail Marys, 10 Our Fathers, confession and communion every week, it doesn't come. As soon as you say, screw it. Here it comes, here it comes. I'm not here to tell you that young man came back because he went on to another life. But I'll tell you there was a turning point not only on my sobriety, but of my life. Because when I got to the other side, when I got over the place where I wanted to blow him away with a shotgun in the gut, run him down on the freeway, when I got, my sponsor assures me they don't lock you up for being crazy, only for acting crazy. When I got to the other side, I touched the power and the strength that was within me because I realized that after all that's said and done, there's only you and me, God, anyway. They never had it to give that which I demanded of them. I was like a parasite looking to take your essence and take it upon me because I thought there was something that they had, the men in my life, that I needed, you see. After all that's said and done, they never had it to give. I am one of those ladies that's had to learn to live alone, to find out the difference between being alone or being in bondage, you see. I didn't know I was in bondage until I was let out. So it was a turning point in my life. They never had it to give. I learned the secret of Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, okay, God, I'm never going to be happy again. Everybody's got a man but me. And I'm never going to be happy again. All you ever want me to do is work with the sick women alcoholics, let them puke on me. All right. So I threw myself completely and absolutely into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous without any reservations and any desire to find another relationship. And I don't know about your God, but I'll tell you what happened to me. I found out the secret. If you're looking for the secret, I'll give you a clue in on the secret. I always had this hunger to be loved, to be wanted, to be accepted. And no matter how much you love me, it does not fill that up. You see, the magic is when I love you and I care for you, it feels exactly the way I thought you loving me would feel. That is the secret that I found for me. Is that when I go to you, when you're down and when you're sick and when you're throwing up and you're hopeless and you're helpless and you can't drink and you can't die and you can't live and you can't be sober, if I hug you and tell you that there is an answer and that I care and you can see it in my face that I care, that feels exactly the way I thought some man loving and taking care of me would feel. Huh? My kids came back one at a time. They went to work, and I went to school and became self-supporting through my own contributions. I kept falling in love and feel, one day at a time I don't drink, and one day at a time I don't steal, and one day at a time I don't get married. And it was around this time that I found out what you'd given me again. You know, there's times, every crisis comes, and there's times that you and I have an opportunity to gauge where we are. I had that opportunity. You see, my sister had always been held as an example. That's what I should be. But she also started drinking and using pills. And she killed herself. And it was my destiny to be the one to find her. And I could not believe what was before my eyes. Death had never touched me that close. But something came together in those days that said God is the only giver and the only taker of life. And she chose to go, and he let her go home. How many times did I want to die? So newcomer, I don't come to save you. If I could have saved anybody, it would have been my sister. I can't even save myself. I come and share my life with you because someplace, somewhere, some woman, or maybe some man, needs to hear the places I come from and what's happened to me. I certainly am God's melody of life, and he sings his song through me. I truly believe that he sings his song through me. 2 weeks after my sister killed herself, I became a grandma. I never knew how to be a mother, but I'm good as a grandma. I'm telling you, I'm good. Them kids think grandma and Santa Claus is synonymous. They came over to visit me when they were still little. They're bigger now, they're not so impressed anymore. But when they were little, they came over and I didn't have any milk, so I had some powdered milk because I've been on a diet forever. And I put water in this powdered milk, and that older one, little eyes got real big, and she went and says, Mama, Grandma just made milk out of water. I'm telling you, I'm good. The joys and the sorrows, you see. The joys and the sorrows. My oldest daughter, if she stays sober, till May the 23rd, will have 6 years as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. That is wonderful. But my youngest daughter is dying out there, you see. She's a heroin addict like her dad was. And I know where she's at least I know that. For a year I didn't know where she was, but I know where she's at now. And I don't bug her, but I called her a few weeks ago and I said, Norma, I called to tell you I love you. She says, Mom, I'm still out there. I said, Norma, I called to tell you that I just love you. And I started making little coochie-coochies on the phone, and we talked and we laughed. And I have to let her go because I know she's so far from the center that only God can reach down and touch her. If he's going to do that, maybe she has to die. But you see, her life is none of my business. And my life is none of my business. My business is to be about my Father's business, to attempt to do whatever my higher power has spared me to do. I told you I wasn't going to get married, and I fell in love with a newcomer. If there's any spiritual giants that offends you, I'll tell you it offended me. It was very embarrassing to be sober 13 years and fall in love with a new person. But I tell you that this guy blows my ears and I follow him anywhere. I mean, we are both dedicated to making me happy. I mean, what a deal. I've convinced him that a woman's place is in the mall. And he thinks I'm the greatest cook he's ever had, so I'm over there cooking him all. Before I leave to come to conferences without him, I cook and say, looky here, what I got for you. He says, you're so wonderful to do. He says, and my shirts never looked so good before. So I've got 75 of them, all ironed, color coordinated. He says, my house has never been so clean. So there's scrubbing. I think I was a latent Betty Crocker type all along. I took my oldest little granddaughter to a conference with me once, and I had a long white blouse that covers a multitude of tortillas and beans and white pair of pants to match, and she looked up at me with a shiny little face, and she says, Grandma, you look just like the white angel. And I looked at the child, and all she sees is what you've done with me. She's never had to see her grandma crawling around in her own filth, so battered that she doesn't look like a human being. She's never had to have the batterings or the abuse that her mother had. All she sees is what you've done with me. And I could never have done it by myself. How could I? He has touched me. May he do the same for you. Thank you so much for that.